Now it had occurred when humanity had started to increase on the surface of the ground, and daughters had been born to them. The sons of the Elohim saw the daughters of the human that they were good looking, so they took wives for themselves, for many whom they chose. Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. Welcome. Episode 319. 319 episodes strong of this Uncanny Earth, the best podcast on the paranormal. You're going to hear this side of the tracks, or this side of the river, or at the other side of the tracks, or the other side of the river. Just know it's the best place to get all the good content in one paranormal plunge. Tonight we'll be talking about the fallen, but we do have an announcement, however, from our good buddy Spider here. He's going to be talking to an author about a book. Tell us about it.
That's right. I've done the interview. I did the interview a few days ago, and it's going to be coming up on April 30th on my other show, which is Spider Does Things, the show, which you can listen to on Spotify, etc., along with this Uncanny Earth. Don't want to leave anybody in the dark with that. But it'll debut then. I interviewed a member of the writing team, and the book is a sort of dystopian, sort of not, kind of a hybrid type of sci-fi novel. It's billed as for fans of Blade Runner, Altered Carbon, and Ghost in the Shell, but I think also if you were a fan of The Expanse, you might enjoy it, and some of those other sort of future things where humans are kind of secondary towards AI and robotics and all that other kind of stuff. I'm going to post a link in the... Don't ask me why I slipped into that accent either. I didn't mean to.
He's going to post. He's going to post it. He's going to post it into the chat.
Here into the chat. As long as my phone will send. There we go. That's the fun stuff about technology. The phone can just send a link straight to my tablet, and I can set it in the chat room right there. That is a pre-order link for the digital novel Jack and V. It's 9 chapters. It's not super long, and if anybody wants to read it ahead of time, then you can read some blurbs, and you can get the pre-order. The pre-order is only $3.
Hey, Spider, do me a favor. Can you unplug your audio and plug it back in? You're spotting.
Let me adjust a couple things here too.
You're good. You're good. I just noticed it. So.
I was gonna say it reminded me of like Terminator or the Matrix.
Check. How's that?
Wait a minute. Say that again, Spider.
Check. How's that?
Still a little spotty, but we can manage. If it gets too bad, I'll let you know.
Let me temporarily mute.
Sometimes you just got to unplug it and plug it back in. Sometimes that does work. It's not always. What's up, James? Welcome. We got a good show for you guys tonight.
All right, let's see. How's that going?
Give me a sentence.
This is a full sentence crafted by someone who likes to speak sentences.
That's a good sentence, but yeah, it's still a little spotty. But we'll just have to.
It could be this thing.
Yeah, mine's starting to go out too.
I'll keep fiddling with it, and hopefully it'll.
Do you need I can give you a pair of headphones. I have.
No, I probably have something that I can do.
Sounds like an old person. I could probably do something.
Get the thing to cooperate if I smash it against a wall and
okay, now you sound like
it in the old days.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Am I right? So the question on my mind, Spider, is: did you get a advanced copy?
I did. I did. I'm only 2
Nice.
chapters in because I wanted to read it
Awesome.
slowly so I didn't drop any spoilers by mistake during the interview.
I get it.
But this is a person that I know I go way back with.
Okay.
I've known them for a long time. I went to his son's wedding quite a while ago. You've met his son, actually.
Me?
Met, yep, you sure have. You've met Luke way back
Oh,
in the day.
so Luke's dad got married?
No. I went to his son's wedding. Luke is married now.
Oh, I was so confused about what you just said. I was like,
No,
Luke's
no.
dad got married? That's
No.
crazy.
This guy's son is Luke.
Is Luke.
Is Luke.
That's
so.
awesome, man. So he finally got married. That's good. Good for him. Congratulations to Luke.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Luke.
they're doing good up in upstate New York.
Once we get some soundboards of some form, we'll be able to do claps and cheers, and so I'm putting that on you because I know you can figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and I've dropped the ball on it too because I have easy access to a lot of that stuff, and I need to just add it to the thing. I cleared off all the old useless music that we didn't use just to troll each other with, and so I can fill that all out with sounds now.
And excellent. So yes, check the book out when it drops. What is the name of the book?
It's called Jack and V, and it's May 5th is when it comes out. And it is $3, as I said, $2.99 on Amazon. It's
Can't beat
Kindle.
Oh, that's a good price.
And I'm sure probably you can use it on other e-readers and digital things too. I'm reading it in PDF, so I'm sure you can probably get it in that fashion. So,
Jack and V. It sounds like an episode of Cyberpunk.
And again, the full interview is coming on April 30th. Watch for it to show up wherever you stream your favorite podcasts like this.
Are you going to have the book read by April 30th?
The whole thing, I don't know. I'm chipping away at it, but the interview's already recorded, so
Oh, so it's a little too late to be.
Yeah. The interview's already recorded, and I specifically only read the first couple chapters for that. So, but
okay, all right.
Time is strange when I do my recordings.
So today we are going to talk about the Fallen Messengers. I definitely would like to thank Spider for bringing up the book. If you can do so, please get this book $3. You spend that on a mocha frappuccino large grande.
Oh, you spend more than that.
I've heard if you don't say grande
Americano
and you say large, built from the Gulf of America, if you say large, they take you in the back and shoot you. You gotta say grande. Yeah.
That sounds serious.
It is. You get your star bucked, if you know what I mean.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Not good. Anyways, welcome. Tonight we're discussing fallen angels, fallen messengers. I go to messengers because that was the original definition. Angel just is a Latin term from that. So messenger was the original transfer. No, brain. Let's get it together.
Translation.
Thank you. That's it. We'll get it. My brain is just
question.
Yes, go ahead. Good question.
So is that just this in the book of Enoch? It was only translated as angel instead of messenger, or are you saying that angels are messengers?
Okay, so the original translation from like back in the day, like back during there, would be messengers. Because they were God's messengers, they would take God's message to people on earth. So they were initially called messengers. Then angel came around after Latin and all that jazz. But good question. So there's not just one book that talks about the Watchers. There are a plethora, really. There is the Bible, and that's it. No, I'm kidding. There's the Bible. There's the Book of Enoch. There's the Book of Jubilees. There's a couple other different books outside of that talk about the Watchers, the Nephilim, the Fallen, however you want to say it. The Nephilim are really the children, but I bunched them all in together because they're all part and parcel of the story that we're talking about tonight. Usually I would go into my diatribe about the Fallen, but I'm not going to do that so much today because we already know, like, all of us here are pretty seasoned, except Steven. He just has kind of inundated it like recently, but me and Spider are pretty seasoned when it comes to this topic. I'm not going to say we're experts because I'm not an expert. I can't prove that they exist or didn't exist. but we're pretty well seasoned in the conversation. And really, it gets started in Genesis chapter 6 because the book of Enoch didn't really come about until I believe the 30s, 34, I want to say, like somewhere in the 30s. R.H. Charles was the first one to decode it or translate it to English. Yes, Steven.
I was actually listening to the audiobook on Spotify earlier today, and according to Spotify, they told me it was 1917.
It
But
could be
I don't know how
1917.
accurate that is.
For some reason, I just thought the R.H. Charles version was like 1930 something, but I 100% could be.
But this, you're the professional. I
I
was
am
just
not a
listening
professional, sir. And if you say it again, you're kicked off the show.
I was just
Don't
listening
ever
to an
call me a
audiobook on
professional.
Spotify.
No, you're fine. And like I said, I could be wrong, but I thought it was in the 30s, which is, that's
Either
a
way.
date. Dates are goofy sometimes when it
Yeah.
comes to certain things. I might be off by, 20 years.
And it could be a different translation as well.
But for the most part, early 1900s
Okay.
was really when the Book of Enoch was translated. A lot of it was left out. A lot of books were actually left out of the Bible itself, save for the Catholic Bible, which had some of the Apocrypha in, and not all of the books of the Apocrypha. Because some of the books of the Apocrypha are very brief. The Book of the Giants, which is part of the Book of the Fallen, it's really kind of like a trilogy, if you will. The Bible, the Book of Enoch, and then the Book of Giants, because the Book of Giants foretell what is going to happen. And if we go by this notion, this means Enoch knows about the flood going to happen and just passes it down to his ancestors, which would make sense. That would give you enough time to draw up the plans for a boat of that stature. You have generations to actually work on and perfecting this. It just says Noah built it. It didn't say there wasn't prototypes before it or trial and run errors before it. We have to understand this when we go into talking about the Book of Enoch, the Bible, and the Apocrypha and things like that, because it's all in one encompassing sphere, except your more Gnostic texts. And those are still in that sphere, but they're kind of off to the right or the left, and not in a political way, just kind of down to the right or the left as like subsequent material. Think of them as hadiths, if you will, to the Quran. So what I think we are seeing first with this connotation, because in Genesis 6, it talks about angels coming down or messengers coming down, sons of Elohim, as I said in the intro there, mating with female women. And this is a common occurrence, mind you. This is going to be something that happens in the Book of Enoch as well. Now, the Book of Jubilees is sort of the after the flood result, right? And I want to point something out in the Book of Jubilees. It says that Noah's, I believe it was his great-grandson or his grandson, found a tablet with instructions from the watchers on the tablet. And there was 2 tablets made. There was one that could withstand a flood and one that could withstand a fire. So obviously the one that could withstand the fire, the one that could withstand the flood still made it. Okay. And so we have that, but for the most part, the Nephilim aren't, or the watchers, the messengers aren't discussed very much in the Bible. It talks about it later on in 2 Peter, where the fallen ones are put into a place like Tartarus would be the way I would say it. Tartarus, which is like basically like a dark place. It's not a hellish place. It's just a dark place, a place of imprisonment. Oh. So you have that, and then you have some subsequent books that I think come off of that in a way, and I'll discuss that later on. But it's like Genesis 6 is just a little blurb because it goes through it really fast. Here's the angel or the messengers that are looking down on women. They come in and fornicate with said women. Giants, flood, gone. Right? There's no intricacies involved. There's no storytelling. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4. It's over. Because then Noah lands, and then it's all based off generational stuff at that point of what happens. But the Book of Enoch kind of takes that blurb and expounds upon it. And in this tale, we have Semyaza A bunch of other ones. There was like, how many were there, Deadpool?
12 or 13, I think. I actually
Okay.
have it pulled up right here.
You
So
don't have
if
to
you'll
say
give
all the
me one
names because
second.
they are kind of tedious. But
There were
the
200 of them, and each of them had commanders, and each commander led 10 of them.
So we got to figure they're basically an army.
Yeah. My favorite was Azazel. I'll say that much. So I don't like rant about it.
Well, and we will get to him, but Semyaza is like the one that looks at the girls and says, "Hey, she's good looking. Let me go down there and holler at her." You know what I mean? And so his friends are like, "Oh yeah, they're all cute. We'll go down and holler at them." That's not to say that those same messengers didn't walk amongst people at that time. They just decided they would go and fornicate, right? So they go down on Mount Hermon and they say, "We got to do this." And they make a pact, a bond, which is very important. And that's one of the things people kind of leave out on this is that pact. So they've made a pact to go against the wishes of the creator, right? So they know he's going to be mad at them. So they do it and they produce the Nephilim or the giants or the men of renown. The one thing I want to point out is renowned is essentially, famous. And these were men of renown, or these beings were men of renown. So they were known. We got to understand this. They were known before they came down. Because why would you call somebody a man of renown? That's all. That was just So that happens. They get punished because what they did was they traded intercourse for knowledge. They said, okay, we can have some of your women. We'll give you the abilities, the intelligence to do things that you don't know how to do or aren't ready for yet. But we'll kind of cliff notes / fast track you to success. So these messengers teach people how to go to war, which is one of the biggest sins in that story. Makeup, astrology, divination, sorceries, things that they know that they're not supposed to pass down to humans, which makes you wonder, would that have been us if we hadn't partaken in whatever situation we partook in, whether it was eating an actual apple, whether that is a metaphor for something else or symbolism, however you want to describe it. Is that what we could have attained? Because I want to pick your brains for a second on this. So Azazel's punished, probably the harshest out of all of them, because it doesn't talk much about Semyaza after Azazel. And I went into some research and I tried to come up with maybe Azazel and Semyaza are the same. Maybe somehow a translation error happened, but no, they were two separate beings. They were two separate messengers. And when that happened, Azazel's charged with the worst crime. So this is my thought. Why did the messengers have to know about war? What was going on where they where they were battle ready at any time? Because they taught this knowledge, which is something you would have to keep in your brain for what? And I'll start with you, Stephen. What do you think that they had to know war for? What do you think was the purpose?
Okay,
chat, feel free to answer this too.
I have a question first. Do you know
ahead.
on the timeline, was this before or after Lucifer was kicked out of heaven?
So here's something else I want to get out there. Lucifer is a story. It's about man placing themselves higher than God.
Okay.
They say Lucifer is this fallen and that fallen. That's not really true.
Not a fallen angel?
No, it's what I believe to be one of the Babylonian kings. Okay. Because that was their ambition. Remember, they built the Tower of Babel so they could connect to God himself. So they always wanted to put themselves above God. So when the Tower of Babel was destroyed and brought low to the earth, it would have been falling. The Empire in
Okay.
itself could also do that as well. And so James here says, fighting with each
yeah.
other and preparing for an attack from heaven. Okay, what do
That's
you think?
that's kind of what I was getting at is
Mhm.
what if they were preparing to attack? Like in my example, I was going to say, what if Lucifer had fallen and they were preparing
Yes.
to go to war with hell and Lucifer and all that? What if they knew that something bad was going to happen and they were getting ready for war?
Okay, that is a fantastic way to look at it. Spider, what do you think?
The first thing that we want to keep in mind anytime that we want to analyze this stuff is you can look at it from a straight spiritually influenced way of reading into it, which is how it's intended to be read. Or you can also look at it from the historical perspective, which is how some of it is also intended to be read, because we know the Old Testament is more or less a handbook of what you're supposed to do in certain situations, with the religious aspect on top to give you a reason to do it. Because people are rebellious, people are dumb, people are a various long list of negative things where they won't want to do what you ask them to do, even if it's for their own good. So much of the information from these books was written long after the events had already happened. They're remembered. They're pulled from earlier sources. That doesn't mean the earlier sources were wrong or that the current source is wrong. It just means it's been a several thousand years game of telephone. And plus, you get people writing these things that are like, you know what? I don't like what that guy said with that translation. I don't think that's correct. Let's just throw that out and not talk about that. Or let's add this in because it's more exciting, or because this is more appropriate for how we look at things now. So there's a lot of details, unfortunately, for as grand a story as it is, as we can read it now, there's a lot missing. An awful lot missing. Like Genesis just goes from creation story to stuff happening super quick.
Yep.
Because they didn't know for sure. They had stories that were told to them when they were younger. And so it goes along with the fallen whatever they were, whether they were angels or some other possibly divine being or possibly not. And a lot of that is left up to interpretation. I feel like, if I'm looking at it objectively, I feel like some things were naturally happening in the civilized environment. There were tensions, there were things going on. People were learning things that other people didn't like the makeup, etc., etc. And I don't necessarily feel like somebody was taught these things, but I think certain people were blamed for teaching these things. And I think that retroactively became some of the stories that were attached to the Watchers and the Fallen, etc. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there was probably something legitimate going on. There was a lot of tribal conflict over resources and things. They didn't know how wide the world was at the time. They knew their local area, and they knew that they had to fight for what they had with their neighbors. And that is a theme that continued throughout most of the Old Testament. You have a lot of bloody battles over territory and places that are seen as, this is the place that you're supposed to be because it's got this and it's got this and this is destined to be yours. And then other people say, no, it's not. Now you're enslaved. Oh, now we're uprising. Now we're going to murder everybody. And now it's ours again. So I think those things were already happening and they attached a story to it after the fact. But again, hypotheticals, we can't really be sure. And I don't want that to take away from various religious beliefs, because if you believe that, the opposite happened, that it was divine communication, by all means, I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just looking at it from a different perspective.
And that's what we that's what we want here, is different perspectives, because we all learn and we all grow. Me personally, I think they had to be ready for battle in a dimensional sense. something. They were fighting something that has long existed, and I think, being around sin, because this is the thing we know is during we know it's during Noah's time, but it was also during Enoch's time. So we're talking a pretty hefty sum of years. And I would be interested to see if when Enoch was taken, if the flood occurred the same day. That's neither here nor there, and that probably is not the case. However, it was a thought. So I think they were battle ready for whatever other dimensional entities or lowercase Elohims with a lowercase e were around. Because we have to understand, if we go to Second Kings and Second Chronicles, where we start getting into, where we start getting to Solomon, we realize that his lust for women put him in a place that was often with foreign gods. And he started to make altars to those foreign gods. And those are always lowercase Elohim with an E. So who knows what spiritual warfare had those angels battle tested and ready to go to war at any point. And then you have these group that already know how to go to war. They come down, and guess what? Oh, so yeah, I was wrong. It was when Methuselah died. That's right. We have to remember that that's a war you're fighting. We fight wars on different fronts. So you have to wonder if there's not a spiritual war involved in that as well. We fight wars, on a physical front, on a mental front, on an emotional front, on a spiritual front. Who's to say these things don't happen and these things aren't influencing people's lives? I'm gonna relax, because that is it's gonna get real. You better be comfortable with things real quick. So, but I digress. The one thing I did want to speak on is, and this is interesting to me here, is that the Nephilim were in those days and beyond. So they kept going, because if we look at King Og of Bashan, or if we look at Goliath, they are basically Nephilim. The Rephaim, the Anakim, all of these tribes had these large men that were slowly killed off, and then we can go on and on. But I digress. I wanted to say there's a part in Revelations, right? And this is a tribulation debate that biblical scholars have with each other, of when and where and how and why and all that jazz. So you have to wonder if Satan was released or unleashed on the world. Remember, Satan isn't a real name. If it, how am I know how to put this?
Like an idea?
It's no. It's kind of like a collection of evil. It's hard to explain, because he's really just called the adversary. It's the adversary.
Yeah,
there's no Satan involved. It's the adversary. But you have to wonder, if he's unleashed, then does that also mean, because what if the adversary is the fallen? They would technically be an adversary. And you have to wonder if they've been unleashed on the earth at present time. Now, I'm not going to go too far crazy, because people will be like, oh my goodness, he's this, that, and the other. He's super hyper religious. No, these are just hypotheses that I have regarding history in terms of a spiritual sense, because I do believe that there is a spiritual sense of history. And whether people want to believe it or not, that's up to them. That's not up to me. So I was just curious if in that time that was them being unleashed on the earth. But it says they're held till judgment. It's a whole thing. If you go timeline in the Bible, it's a whole study in itself. Anyways, I will move along. Now, what we really want to talk about tonight, and I know Spider is just, he's chomping at the bit to get into this one.
Upset that apple cart.
Other cultures and the fallen. This is the part that I find interesting, because it starts fitting like puzzle pieces once you truly understand the nature of everything. The one thing I want to say is, if we start, and have a good night, have a good night, Scruffy. Not a good knife. Be careful with knives. Do not
And
play
if you
with
like
knives.
knives,
I mean,
Aw,
that's fine.
it's
Have a good
fun.
night, Scruffy. Thank you for the raid, sir. I appreciate you and love you, man. Have a good one. If we look at Semyaza, right? He's lusting. He wants some of them fine female ladies. He's like, hey, I want to take you out on the town, across the town, uptown, downtown, right? What about Zeus? Do we remember the tale of Zeus? Because in the Hercules Disney movie, he's an upstanding family man. But if you read about who Zeus actually is, not so much. Not so much. Who does that mirror? Okay, Semyaza. And of course, we could go, and Spider would probably say this, that it's just stories passed down, names changed to protect the innocent type of situation, which I would get in a sense. But then we start talking about the Minotaur, right? And there was, sort of an unholy union involved in all of that, involved in the Nephilim or the Watchers coming down, mating with human women. Different births happened. Minotaur. Now I'm sure everybody's gonna just be like, "Oh my goodness, I'm gonna get out of here." You know, listen, it's gonna get weird. No, but it's just things like that I think about in my brain. Like, okay, that sounds very much like genetic engineering, trying to put a bull's head on a human's body if they had that technology. But you also have the stories. You have things like Mars, or as we know him, Ares, war gods, right? And usually every old type of religion or old type of spiritual belief like that has a war god. There's always at least one war god, or very similar, like the creator of destruction or the creation and destruction. And so my thought here is they are very much alike, the fallen and these other gods. But I will let me get my co-host in here because I feel like I just been jibber jabbering. Steven, give me your thoughts on what you think these beings are, these demigods too. The demigods kind of mirror the Nephilim
Yep.
a little bit. Was Hercules a Nephilim? But please go ahead.
So I was actually thinking about this earlier today, and I think it's very interesting. So I think the Christian God that that people believe in, I think that one is the most powerful and created all the other gods, and all the other gods of the other pantheons, including Zeus, Jupiter, Apollo, Athena, whatever. All these other gods were created by one god who created them all. And then the demigods, like you said, like Hercules and, the ones like that, are essentially the Nephilim, like you said. And then underneath that is just like basic humans, and they're just completely getting throttled because of all the power of all these other creatures.
Well, think about it too for a second. The mannerisms of the fallen would very much mirror the mannerisms of these gods, right? Because hey, we are above you. We are from heaven. You're not. Stay in your place. You have the Nephilim and the giants, and they're all walking around and doing their thing, right? So yes, I think that you have these Greek gods that are very similar to the fallen. That's the thing, and there is a sense of rebellion in all their stories, because who did the Greek gods rebel from? The Titans. So I wonder. Sorry about that. I
Whoa.
wonder. I need to get. It's not. Yeah. I have to
Not the
wonder
gods
at
coming
certain
after you.
times if these were the stories they told humans so that it would push away the creator god, so that they could lie to people, because that's in their repertoire.
Yeah.
Zeus wasn't above lying. Zeus was one of the dirtiest dogs in a religious situation. Like, well known. All he did was fornicate, and then he just killed people when he didn't like them no more. You have people going through the underworld and all that, and What if the underworld they're going through is a prison? I'm done. It's going to get real conspiracy theory, and they're going to be like, no, send him somewhere else. Oh, interesting. But Spider, let me get your take. Before you jump into this hot take, I got a couple more points. I'm gonna ask a couple more questions here. But in terms of these gods and these demigods, what are your thoughts on the fallen being just those told in a different way?
Well, I kind of alluded to this earlier in how I talked about the way that these stories were written far after the fact. And I think there's a lot of projection that goes on as far as modern attributing things to previous gods and things of that nature, because I like to take things, while I'm not a religious person, I do like to look at things from a spiritual way, because I'm interested in the spiritual world, and I think there's some truth to that. But at the same time, I like to take a cold, hard, clinical look at things and see how things would look if you took out every bit of religious everything or every spiritual thing and looked at it like, how would things have worked out if they weren't as fantastic as the stories say? And when I mentioned earlier that I think we put a lot of blame on who came before for teaching us all these things, I think that's what it is. I think these are things that modern humanity, at some point they felt kind of guilty for, and obviously we don't anymore, but we did, and we looked for a reason why. Well, I act this way because they made me this way, because they showed us how to do this. It's all their fault, because the other before us was going away. They were dying off. Because from a very extreme, purely scientific point of view, considering that modern man has hints of Neanderthal DNA, perhaps the Watchers are another hominid species that is now extinct, because they bred with us. And because they bred with us in a time when we were compatible but not exactly the same, we created Nephilim. We created beings who were a hybrid between both that couldn't really survive as their own society. They were larger, they were stronger, they might have even been smarter, but they also maybe were sterile. Maybe they couldn't continue on their species. And so as time went on, they did some great things, because some of them were people of renown. They were the Hercules, they were, the Samson, they were the great, they had power, they had things that they could do that other people couldn't, because they were physically a better gene pool than everybody else. But then you had others. You had James mentioned Grendel. You had people like that, slightly mutated, had problems. You had the Minotaur, maybe not necessarily an actual bull's head, maybe just somebody who looked a bit different and had some issues. We don't know how ancient people regarded things like Down syndrome or different things of that nature. And I think a lot of that got demonized. I think a lot of that got turned into, that person's a monster, that person's a creature, that person's not fit to live with us. We have to lock them away somewhere. And the stories from that grew on and on and on, and they've taken on this mythology all of their own. Now, again, that's taking it to an extreme where you strip away any possible divinity from any of these,
Yes, and I think
can't do.
I think you have to, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to get this point out. I could ride that train with you if there weren't certain factors embedded in each of these tales that has to like, there's always a group, right, of people, whether it be the Nephil, or whether it be the Watchers, whether it be, the gods, whether it be these people, right, of a divine origin and you yourself as a person who knows ancient astronaut theory quite well,
And that's the other part of it too.
and there's always a teaching factor. And I saw Sukalos and Company a month back. Great show, by the way. Really cool guy. And he said at the end, if you were a species like the Anunnaki or something of that nature and you landed on the planet, they're going to try to teach the people.
Mhm.
And then you're going to leave a mark when you go. And there's, for me anyways, I see so many correlating things within each story, and it just kind of keeps growing and growing, and then it just gets so big to a point for me that you have to be like, okay, how much of this is fact now? I could see if one or two societies thought that way. You could rule that out, like, okay, maybe they're both like entwined somehow. They know somebody, they found something. However, when you have so many different societies that have said these similar things, I have to kind of go into it with a. I think it's still science because I still think it's science what they were doing, but at the same time, there's a supernatural aspect that I think we should be looking into. Like, yes, even if you take it at face value, and Minotaur was another term for, somebody that didn't look quite like us, was maldeformed, came out of the womb looking like that, and they threw it in a labyrinth. It would still have to be a somewhat powerful being for it to be able, because you're not, if you just say, hey, yeah, Jim, we put Jim in there. Oh, I ain't scared of Jim. I'm gonna go get that fleece. I'm gonna go get that fleece right now. But when there's stories and legends and this thing has killed people and it's super big and super strong, that's the part for me. The bull's head might be a metaphor too. It might be somebody that was considered a certain class or a certain thing, and they called it a bullhead or BS, whatever. So it got a moniker, right? But it's the feats of strength. It's the attitude of we are better than you. You should be so lucky to just grovel at our feet. Yeah, we're going to teach you, but we basically rule over you. We're gods on earth. So that's my only thing. That's my only thing.
That's the other thing too, because you know that I'm a big fan of ancient Mesopotamia and about the Sumerian creation story.
Yes.
And their creation story states that beings greater than themselves showed up, pulled them out of the ground, which is probably an allegory for pulled us out of living in caves.
Maybe, yeah.
And had us help them with things. They taught us things so we could work better, so they could become better servants for them. They knew medicine, they knew this, they knew agriculture. And then when we got to be troublesome, they wanted to get rid of us. But if you widen it out a little bit from the extreme, just no divinity, no supernatural, nothing, and then you widen that to allow for a little bit more in there, then it opens up the window for there definitely being a previous civilization, whether that previous civilization was very widespread or not, or just a few individuals that were exceptional that went to different parts of the globe, which we know what happens in the stories. We know in South America, we know in Mesopotamia, we know in even parts of Native American stories, the Hopi Indians, the Star People coming down, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you talk about the tablets of fire and water, because the Hopi Indians say the world will be destroyed in a certain particular kind of way. One type will be through fire, one type will be through water. It's connections, and you have to wonder, how are these connected for a primitive people that, from what we've been able to trace about our background, couldn't travel these distances? There has to have been a previous civilized species or version of us to do these things.
Yes.
And that's where you get into like Graham Hancock's work and
Yep.
things like that. So I'm open to that middle ground where I think there was some third party there, and we haven't found exactly who it is. So we have to call them the gods. We have to call them something, the Anunnaki, whoever, to give that connecting piece. And sometime in the near future, I think we're going to find more to legitimize whoever that was, whether they were a species from here, whether they were from a different planet, whether they were from a different dimension or something. The technology and the research and everything is barreling towards that point.
Project Bluebeam.
And I think sometime in the near future, hopefully in my lifetime, probably not, probably the next generation afterwards. So I'm going to miss it and be pissed. But I'm gonna be sitting in the grave being pissed about it. But
5 years.
I think
I'll stop by and we'll sit and drink while they announce it.
I think it's gonna happen that critical linchpin in our history will crop up somehow. And that's how I look at all of this. I hope that we can get to that point at some point.
Now, I want to bring into something else. Because if we look at Genesis, it says God walked with man, like he was side by side with man. Now, another thing that we have to take into account is God's walking among people, right? And every religion, except I think Islam might be one of the few that isn't, and Zoroastrianism, they have gods that walk with people. If we look at, once again, Zeus was shown, right? Zeus was showing himself to all kinds of the ladies. He had physical, intimate relations with the ladies, right?
Like the Anunnaki.
Viracocha, she walked among the people as an Incan god. So you have to once again say, okay, how is this and this similar when they're this far apart? Another one.
Okay, DJ Khaled.
Thank you. We don't know the timeline when the fallen were incarcerated. We don't know that timeline. We don't know the timeline from when they started fornicating, because it was back in Enoch's time to the flood. We know there's that span of time, right? But we don't know the exact time, because time changes after the flood. People don't live as long after the flood.
A quick, because I hate to, because you're on a roll and I don't want to interrupt.
No, please.
But it's interesting that it comes down to that usually, because that's the same reason that the flood happened with Samaria, because either Enki or Enlil, I always mix up which one was mad about it, but one of them was angry because the human servants.
I think it was Enki. I think Enki was the one that wasn't that Enlil's
was
dad?
The good one. Well, no, they were brothers. They were brothers.
That's right. Their father was that's right.
Yeah, and Enki heard the humans doing the thing, getting their groove on,
doing what humans do,
and he didn't like it, and he said, "I'm not going to tell them about this flood that's coming. I'm just not going to tell them. I'm going to let it just wipe them all out." Yep. And so it's interesting that with this, it's a similar thing.
Yes,
they were doing that, and the Nephilim were being created by the same thing, and that was one of the reasons why the people were wicked. So it's another little connector that's a very solid clue.
Yes. Yes, and that's what it is. In Hinduism, both Krishna and Vishnu
Thank you, James.
walk among the people. And Krishna, because for some reason, in a lot of the religions, their gods are sex-starved maniacs. To be fair, and that's not being disrespectful to other people's religions, but Krishna is said to be involved in love affairs. Because remember where the Kama Sutra comes from. That's all I'm going to say. Where the Kama Sutra comes from. And Shiva has whole stories about his interactions with people. We have Vikings who believe that wanderers and travelers were also gods and goddesses in human form. Two demigods that after I thought about it, in very similar situations, Merlin and Morgan could both have been demigods, but in a different form. Like Merlin obviously wasn't strong like Hercules, but he was scientifically gifted. He was scientifically gifted, and so was Morgan. They were both scientifically gifted. They knew how things worked. They knew what elements to fuse with other elements to create the desired effect. That was what was dope to me. Their mentality was very high, you know.
Count Saint Germain.
Count Saint Germain, King Arthur, supposedly King Arthur.
Fulcanelli.
No, Fulcanelli tried to become immortal via the Philosopher's Stone. That wouldn't count.
Aww.
The Philosopher's Stone could be an artifact from that time, though, because immortality is that's a whole another thing.
Yeah.
I want to kind of get into their legacy at this point. Obviously, the key figure of all this treachery is 100% Azazel. We say Semyaza, but Semyaza just wanted to do what Enlil hated hearing. He wanted to do that. So, you know, but the lust starts it, but the war mind is what ends it. It takes the screams of the dying of people who are literally getting eaten by these creatures, whether that was an act of cannibalism, or whether that was, you know, an act of just big and doesn't have anything going on upstairs. So all it knows is hunger and survival. Which, you know, to Spider's point, the genetic deterioration of two species of different, two different species mating might cause a genetic abnormality, much like we have the Plantagenet dynasty, who most of them were sleeping with each other in the same family. And we saw what that created. So imagine what would be created from something that would be heavenly, or in Spider's case, different species, with something that is our species. The chemical reactions and things that would take place, the physiology, just imagine having to birth these monstrosities. And that's a whole other thing. But my thing about this is, and we already talked about this, is why the messenger would need war. But, you know, we discussed that. But I want to get into Antarctica. Antarctica, this is my favorite conspiracy theory that I have created, by the way. Just put that out there. No,
I got to interrupt you one last
There's
thing.
There's no more quick things.
It's
We're going
the last,
in.
I promise.
We're going in.
Because you mentioned Azazel, and I thought this was interesting because it kind of goes along with my little pet theories there.
Okay.
In the Hebrew Bible, prior to the Book of Enoch and prior to the Second Temple period, Azazel wasn't the name of a singular being, it was another title. And it was the title of a desolate place where a scapegoat
was sacrificed.
The sins of the Jews was sacrificed during Yom Kippur, which again, projecting what we like. These are all the things that we've done wrong, but it's not our fault. It's this person's fault, as if it's some previous ritual that they're used to doing. It's a very interesting connection with all that.
100%.
Now,
I
again,
didn't think about that until you said that. That's a good one.
Does it prove anything that I've presented? Not necessarily, but it adds connective tissue. And that's what it is. Across the various extremes, somewhere in the middle, there's a really important, interesting truth.
You know, because you have to wonder. Because I didn't think about that. You said, I'm like, oh, yeah, the scapegoat out in the wilderness. And then,
the blame, the projection.
But you have to wonder if that kept Azazel at bay from going to town. Because
Is that why it was named that? Was it named after him to begin with?
That's the thing.
It's just, it's so interesting. And this is where all the stuff goes.
Once you pull one thread, 50,000 threads come out, and you have to sift through each thread and then tie the other threads to the other threads until it's one long thread. And then sometimes you got to cut threads and take threads off. And then next thing
and then you're doing that
everywhere.
Meme from Sunny in Philadelphia,
where there's a bunch of, But Antarctica, one of my favorite conspiracy theories. Um, it has miles of ice. How much did you say
6
Deadpool lived?
miles.
6 miles. 6 miles of ice that
And-
separates it from the land underneath it. 6 miles.
And the climate is dry.
Nobody is digging 6 miles unless you're one of the many governments who don't fight there whatsoever. Go there and study. And listen, I think if you want to take it in science terms, I think they're studying what the land is underneath, and somehow they're working to try to do that. So if we're going to put it at face value, I think that's the face value part of that, right? Makes sense. You don't want to just go in there and start destroying stuff because you don't know what'll happen. You don't know what happens if that you go in there and start throwing nuclear bombs around. You're going to melt
Have
all that
fun with
ice
your
real
virus.
quick, real quick. So, but I have a theory, and it's probably once again guy with the crazy hands and the things behind him. But I think that's where the fallen are buried. I think they're imprisoned above an ice sheet, and then in the dirt below that ice sheet. Because like I said, I
To
know like it's
support
crazy.
your theory, though.
Go ahead.
To support your theory,
Go ahead.
they say that the climate in Antarctica is as dry as the Sahara Desert, and they get like 2 or 3 inches of rainfall per year. So they also say that Azazel was buried in the darkness in the desert.
Duendal. But Duendal is not Duendal is in Jerusalem. It's like east of Jerusalem.
Okay.
So it doesn't fit that unless
the polar shift.
Not the polar shift, but maybe the land was bigger. But that's a whole nother case that we're getting into about that. But Durandal is where Azazel was chained and bound. And that's a real desert. And that's a good place to bury something. Ain't nobody digging through sand because the sand's just going to keep coming back.
Thank
and
you, James.
Sand gets in everything. It gets in everything. But I want to point to something, and this may not even be. Listen, let me disclaimer this. This is going to be the craziest one I say tonight. All right. And thank you, James. I appreciate it. Thank you. Is Dante's Inferno a clue to where the messengers could reside?
Ooh.
Let's take a little trip. Okay, so have you both read the Inferno?
I haven't read it, but I played the video game.
All right, you're not allowed to talk anymore for the rest of this show, because you are not.
It has been years, so I'm a bit rusty, but I'm
okay.
sure
No,
I'll
this will be easy.
So.
This will be easy for you. What is the last level of hell?
It's a frozen lake, which the adversary. Do they call him Satan in?
I believe so. Yes.
Because by that term, I think the term
it's close. It's very yeah.
He's buried in the ice from his middle up. He can't get out because it's ice that doesn't melt. And where on the planet does ice not melt? Really, it's on the poles. So it is a valid theory.
Wait. Valid. It gets better. What is in his mouth? He's got something in his left and something in his right hand, and he has a thing in his mouth. Mm-hmm. What is in his mouth?
He's got 3 betrayers with him.
But who's the one in his mouth?
Them, and that's where I'm probably going to get it wrong because I don't remember exactly. I know the 3 betrayers are Judas Iscariot.
Yep.
He's got Cassius.
Yep.
Cassius. Is Brutus the other one?
Brutus is the third. Okay. What are they guilty of?
Betrayal.
What is the devil guilty of?
Betrayal.
To stab somebody in the back would be cold as
ice. Yep. Because revenge is a dish best served cold.
And everybody in that lake, because Virgil and Dante are walking across this ice lake, and everybody that's buried in the lake is betrayers. All of them.
Betrayers.
Every single person on that
Which
level.
is interesting that's the worst sin you can do.
is betray.
according to the Divine Comedy, which is it's something that I kind of have to believe in, because if you've stabbed me in the back, then you're somebody that I trusted with to be at my back. I
Yes.
say this a lot. I say this to people when everybody's like, "Oh, my homie, he turned on me. He did this. He did this." I'm like, "Well, you know what? An enemy is going to stab you in the front because they hate you.
Yes.
Only a friend is going to stab you in the back because you don't see it coming."
It'd be the ones closest to you.
Yeah.
Keep
Be
your
the ones
friends
closest
close
to
and your
you.
enemies closer.
So that for me is really kind of what ties all of that nutcase theory in. That's fine. You can call me a nutcase in the comments. I'm fine with this, but let me just say this. I have no way to prove most of what I've talked about tonight. Okay. A lot of time our show has some conjecture and theories and hypothesis, but
Hypotheticals.
at the end of the day, none of us here know for 100% certain. And that's the best part about it, because it's up to us to decode what is true and what is false, because history will not do it for you. Mainstream academia will not, because they throw everything out the window and they just leave the facts. And I know people are like, yeah, that's what you want, the facts. No, because I think there's more to it than just straight edge things.
The facts they want you to know.
That's my opinion. Take it for whatever you want to take it for. I don't care. But I think that none of this matters. None of this. None of this matters. You make my walls bleed right now. I have a great time discussing the unknown because you don't know. So you can have these amazing and really enlightening thoughts when you're just having conversations like this, and then it starts connecting dots, it starts connecting things. That's my favorite part. It's been an absolute blast doing this show. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. So yes, very awesome. I want to thank both Steven and Spider tonight for being awesome and being well knowledge, and Spider coming in with some of that sass. He came in hot with some of that sass. He was like, well, wouldn't it be kind of
Well,
different?
actually,
Wouldn't it be kind of?
I always got to throw in those wrenches, the gears,
You
and
have
everything.
to. You have to, because if you don't, it doesn't evolve the conversation. It just keeps
Gotta
it
question
stagnant.
everything.
Of
Gotta
course.
question everything.
Especially this kind of stuff.
That's the scientific method. You question everything. You
Yep.
accept what you find until something else comes along that changes it.
Yep.
That's how it is.
And it's okay to have your religious or spiritual beliefs. It's okay to have those.
Mhm.
It's perfectly fine to have those. Try to get some science in there, though. It does wonders. It really does wonders. Because then you're like, oh, now I understand the migration of people and the way they did things. It's good to understand science history and all of that, even if you are a religious person. There's nothing wrong with it.
When one proves the other, it's perfect.
But that's it for me, and that's it for my compadres. Next week, we will have Steven back at the helm, which I don't know if I really. He might have to have an accident before the show. Some stairs are calling your name, son. No. He's going to be talking about death rituals. Steven, can you give us a little preview of what you're going to be talking about next week?
So basically, I'm going to be talking about death rituals and different types of ways that people might get buried and things that they do during funerals in different cultures and stuff like that. Like one I found really interesting was called autopsy, and
don't explain it yet. Leave the
Don't explain it.
Leave the anticipation. This is just a sneak preview.
No,
sky
don't
burials. Sky burials.
That's the one I'm excited about because I've read about those and they're so cool. And you guys, if I pass, you guys both better do that. I want to be buried on the side of a mountain. Yeah. You better risk your lives to bury me.
Who cares if it's illegal?
Shut your mouth. It's not. We make the rules.
It's only legal if you get caught.
It's only illegal if you get caught.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not an advocation, children. So
don't do
illegal things.
Sorry, make sure you get some sleep and listen to your parents.
Roger.
You shouldn't be listening to this. Ooh, yay. Anyways, we are out. We have sassed around and goofed around and warmed ourselves by your fires long enough. We know you loved having us, but we have things to do. So we can't just hang out. We would love to hang out. Maybe in the future we'll have a little convention where you can come and hang out with us. I don't know who wants to do that, but if you would like to, come hang out with us. I guess that's what, you know what? Book it here. That's what we're calling it. Come hang out with us. And that's it. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Event page is going up tomorrow.
There it is. Banners. Expensive ones.
$13,000.
$13,000. All right, we're out here. Have a good night. Later.